Hi everybody, so my name is Jordan. I am here to present my research paper that we did in 3.5 this week. So the research question that I was supposed to be researching was question number 4, which is the book of Ruth, Esther, and Daniel seem like very different stories. However, there are common questions that can be asked of each of these. The questions are, what is God doing in the stories? What are the people of God doing in the stories? And what do these stories call the people of God to do? Then we're supposed to draw some conclusions about the themes that were being communicated in these scriptures. So essentially the research that I did just centered around what the stories are and answered the questions. So in the book of Ruth, the central theme, we see how God works through ordinary people. It's not really too big of events that happen here. But we know the story of Ruth the Moabite and Boaz the farmer. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. But essentially the story is about Ruth and Boaz redeeming Naomi's family. Essentially, Ruth was married to one of Naomi's sons, and the sons died, and then Naomi's husband died. So Ruth and Naomi moved back to Israel, even though they're Jews. So they didn't want to be discriminated against. I guess it's hard to, move back and be a widowed woman. So essentially they pick some I don't remember what they were called, but basically Ruth is in Boaz's farm in the field, and she's picking some of his crops or whatever they were called. And essentially this book is just about, Boaz being the redeemer of the family, who then marries Ruth and basically restores their name. So the central theme that was communicated here, that although God is mentioned in the story, it's also Naomi is also a central character, that God is faithful to his people, and as long as we're faithful to him, then he is faithful to us. And I really like this story because Ruth was loyal to Naomi, and it kind of also makes you think about God's loyalty to the people who love him, and that it was kind of demonstrated in their relationship. The next story that we were going to be looking at was the book of Esther, and basically this book is about how God demonstrates the book demonstrates God's work for the betterment of his people. So this book, it takes place 100 years after the exile. And the main characters of this book is Mordecai and Esther. This is a really exciting story. It's one of my favorites. But essentially, this is about Mordecai and Esther. They're both Jews trying to hide their identity. And essentially, we're introduced to the Persian king and the king's adversary, which is Haman. Haman is the villain, essentially. And basically, the king, he's a very boastful king, very proud king. He basically does away with his wife because she didn't want to follow his orders to be paraded in front of everybody of how beautiful she was. And so basically he holds a pageant for a new queen, and Esther enters the pageant without hiding her Jewish identity. She ends up winning the pageant, and essentially Mordecai, he ends up saving the king's life, because since he's now in the king's, in the palace, he hears about some guards that are trying to kill the king. He saves the king's life. Haman, obviously, he's the jealous figure. So it kind of, even though the story is about Mordecai and Esther, it also shows how everyday things, there's always not necessarily, I want to say the bad side, but there's always something that is there to kind of hinder you. And it basically, demonstrates that we have to trust in God to deliver us regardless of the circumstances. So Haman is jealous of Mordecai, and he calls for execution of all the Jews in the land. well, Esther, she ends up saving her people, and essentially Haman is the one at the end of the story who is basically persecuted and killed. And essentially this basically just kind of demonstrates that those who are faithful to God, God is faithful back. That is the central theme that I see for all three of these books, is that he will deliver his people from persecution. Same as the book, the same themes that you see in the book of Daniel, is that, you know, he gives these prophecies and not too many people are happy about it, and they're trying to make him recognize them as king, but he holds loyal to God and knows that God is the one true king. So the three themes is that as long as we stay faithful to God, regardless of the circumstances, God is going to be faithful back to us. He is going to deliver us through any trials or tribulations we may experience. And basically, you know, even though in the third book, God isn't even mentioned in the book of Daniel, but God is still at work. So even though there's times where you may think that God is not present in your life, he is still at work in the background. So that basically kind of, you know, summarizes the research that I did, was the themes that were in these different books and how God interacted with these people in the books, the different characters such as Daniel, Ruth, Esther, Mordecai, all of the different characters. You know, those who honor God are those who come out on top in the end. So thank you for listening. And yeah.